this third generation, guys, Kia Ceed further sharpens its proposition in the Focus Class family hatchback segment with smarter looks, extra technology, a rejuvenated range of engines, stronger standards of safety, and most importantly, a far more dynamic driving demeanour. As before, value continues as a strong suit, and as usual, there's an industry-leading warranty. Potentially then, there's a lot to like here.
If you want to better appreciate just why Kia is one of the fastest growing automotive brands in the world, you've only got to look at this car, the Ceed family hatchback. The Slovakian factory that builds it only opened its doors in 2006, yet already over 1.3 million Ceed models have been built. Can that momentum continue in the face of much tougher opposition in this, Europe's most important model segment? Well, it's the task of this more stylish, dynamically able, third generation version to try to ensure that it will. Automotive historians will look back at the original first generation version of this car, which was launched back in 2006 as a landmark design, the first to take on the European and Japanese market leaders squarely on their own terms in the volume, Focus and Golf dominated family hatchback sector. Built in the heart of Europe, it was targeted right at the heart of the European motor industry, hence the unusual Ceed name. That's a combination of the French abbreviation for European Community, CE, and this car's project title, ED. Now, it shamed the establishment players by matching their quality while massively undercutting their prices and offering an astonishingly long 7-year warranty. A strong sales performance followed, kick-starting this Korean brand's emergence as a motor industry force to be reckoned with. That's been one of the enduring industrial stories of the last decade. It's right up there with Google, Apple and Facebook, and every bit as impressive. But times change and so do market segments. Increasingly, family hatchback buyers are being tempted away into Qashqai-like family SUV models, while the customers in this sector that remain are targeted by European and Japanese brands that have now learned to take the Korean motor industry a lot more seriously. Kia, of course, has responded to this. Its own mid-sized SUV, the Sportage, is a strong Qashqai class alternative, and the Ceed was relaunched in more sophisticated second-generation JD series form in 2012 and then substantially updated in 2016 before this Mark III range was launched in mid-2018. Now, that silly apostrophe that previously featured in the Ceed name has now gone, but the relentless attention to detail which characterised the design of those previous models has, we're told, been prioritised just as much. A lot's expected here, for this car must, throughout its lifetime, take on all new versions of its segment's two heaviest hitters, Ford's Focus and Volkswagen's Golf. In response, Kia has used many of the same people who created their sleek, dynamically performing Stinger GT flagship model to try to transform the rather uninspiring looks and the forgettable handling of this car's predecessor. There's an all-new K2 platform to undergird it all, along with new engine technology, improved connectivity, and a big step forward in camera-driven safety provision. Plus, if you don't want this 5-door hatch, then there's the option of a stylish new shooting brake style station wagon-like body shape that bears the Pro Ceed name, and that's along with the usual conventional sports wagon estate variant and a potent GT hot hatch. So, will it all be enough? It'll be interesting to see. Is it really necessary for a Kia Ceed to be honed at the Nürburgring and to feature the kind of dynamic handling engineering CV that you might think more befitting to a serious hot hatch? Well, many of the thousands of people who happily owned a car from this model line in its first 2 generations might be ambivalent about such developments, but this effort has been made because going forward, the Ceed has to reach out far beyond such relatively undemanding customers to those who require much more than just practicality and value from their chosen family hatch. If these people can be persuaded to shake their prejudices and try a Ceed, then they may find Kia's marketing slogan, the power to surprise, to have some actual basis in fact. For us, it was the vastly improved way that this car steers that was most evident at first. There are no silly variable force settings this time around, just one feelsome, well-weighted rack, which is as consistent and progressive as you would want, and perhaps as you'd expect from a drive development team who've been able to draw on experience gained from engineering products as impressive as Kia's Stinger GT and Hyundai's i30N. Then you try a corner, expecting perhaps the same vaguely competent standards of body control and outright grip that have always characterized mainstream Korean products in this segment. And you get instead a car that's up for pretty much whatever you want to throw at it. You can place this Ceed confidently through the bends and enjoy an eagerness powering out of each turn that's aided by torque vectoring, which lightly dabs the front brakes to help tuck the nose in and ease you urgently through the corner. Throughout, there's a sense that the rear wheels are playing a real part in the whole process, rather than just grimly hanging on. Better still, this Kia feels sucked to the road, closely following the grade and angle of the tarmac without being unduly influenced by it. There is, of course, a reason for this, or rather several reasons. The front springs are a massive 40% stiffer this time around, while those at the rear have been slightly softened to try to make this car flow through corners and across undulations more fluidly, which was also the aim of all the many and varied detail changes made to the geometry and the roll bars. Plus, it helps that all of this is now founded on a much stiffer K2 series platform, and it builds on a basic damping system that was more advanced than usual to start with. Now, many cars in this segment fob you off with a crude torsion bar rear suspension setup in their mainstream guises, and they reserve properly sophisticated multi-link rear springs for the more powerful variants that very few customers choose. As it's always done though, this Ceed, like its very similarly engineered Hyundai i30 cousin, standardizes that multi-link technology right across the range, and that's why more serious mid-corner tarmac tears taken at speed, which might momentarily throw an ordinary Golf or Focus slightly offline, are taken more easily in this Kia Stride. Ah yes, the Focus. Well, apparently that's Kia's benchmark when it comes to developing this model. And what sets that car apart in this sector is the way that it manages to accomplish much of the dynamic stuff that this Ceed has now mastered, while at the same time delivering a fluid and absorbent quality of ride. Now, this Korean contender isn't quite as good in that regard. No, it certainly doesn't acquaint you with every bump and ripple on the tarmac, but there's no doubt that its setup is on the firm side. Presumably, this is how engineering chief Albert Biermann thinks a car designed for Europe and built in Europe should ride. It is worth pointing out to him, though, that quite a few of the other cars in this segment that share that kind of approach provide buyers with a kind of optional adaptive damping system that isn't available here. Perhaps we're being unduly overcritical. After all, unless you really do favour a very comfort-orientated driving demeanour, you'll probably be quite satisfied with what Kia served up here, especially since it's delivered this time around with even more impressive standards of refinement, which is saying something because the previous generation Ceed model was, for us, a standout car in that regard. Now, quite a lot of this is down to the work that the brand has put in to reduce vibration from its latest generation range of engines, even the diesel ones, which in previous models tended to clatter their way through the power band. The new U3 series 1.6-litre CRDI unit the company served up for this car makes its presence known only over about 3,000 RPM. Otherwise, it stays meekly muted, and even in its base 114 brake horsepower form, reasonably urgent thanks to 280 Nm of pulling power. In base models where this engine is mated to an efficiency-orientated eco-pack, 62 miles an hour from rest takes 10.6 seconds on the way to 118 miles an hour. Elsewhere in the range with this unit, you'll do a fraction better, or quite a lot better, if you choose this engine in one of the sportier variants, where software tweaks retune it to put out 134 brake horsepower. If you want a black pump fueled version of this car that's a bit more advanced, then you'll be interested in Kia's EcoDynamics Plus 48-volt mild hybrid diesel technology, which sees more expensive CRDI versions of this Ceed featuring an engine that's assisted by a compact starter generator unit belt connected to the crankshaft. But of course, diesel power is assuming less and less importance in mainstream automotive models these days, so it's just as well that this Korean brand also has its advanced TGDI petrol technology to fall back on. This is delivered here in 3 guises, with the most popular one likely to be the little 998cc 3-cylinder 1 litre unit that props up the range, producing 118 bhp. It's an efficient and eager little power plant that's quite sufficient for the modest needs of most potential Ceed buyers. However, it's also one in our experience that has to be worked quite hard if you want to get moving with any kind of real speed. Doubtless the quoted performance stats for this variant, 62 mph in 10.9 seconds from rest on the way to 116 miles an hour for a base EcoPack equipped version, are achievable, but you'd really have to thrash the engine a bit to replicate that claim. It's for that reason that we prefer the rarer 1.4 litre TGDI option that we're trying here. This is a 4-cylinder engine with 138 brake horsepower, but it still manages a set of efficiency figures that are really quite close to those of the entry-level unit. And thanks to around 40% more pulling power, this power plant's much more happy to oblige if you find yourself running a bit late or needing to pull out from a junction toot sweet in dense, fast-flowing traffic. 62 miles an hour from rest takes 8.6 seconds en route to 130 miles an hour. That's if you go for the 6-speed manual gearbox that all Ceeds come fitted with as standard. On this pokier petrol model, as well as on plusher versions of the diesel, there's also the option of Kia's smooth shifting 7-speed DCT dual clutch transmission, which lacks steering wheel paddles, but which does come with an extra drive mode select sport mode, which claims to alter throttle, steering and gear shift timings. Is there more to say? Well, only if you want to hear about the top hot hatch variant, the Ceed GT. It's a mild-mannered shopping rocket that'll be of limited interest to typical buyers of this model line, but a car which is of importance to Kia, improving its engineering credentials to the rest of the European motor industry. This 1.6 litre TGDI 201 brake horsepower model is nothing like as powerful or as focused as its cousin, the fire-breathing 2 litre Hyundai i30N, but with 265 Nm of torque, it's still a pretty rapid thing, hence the quicker steering and the beefier brakes. Expect that variant to be a very rare sight on British roads though. But more mainstream versions of this Ceed may not be. As we said, it's quiet, stable, feelsome and enjoyable to punt along. You don't get the driving mode system for manual versions that rival Golf and Focus models offer, but somehow you don't really need it. Even if you don't like driving, then this Kia claims to have something to offer, or at least the top automatic models do. Those are equipped with a lane following assist system that in highway cruising conditions seamlessly controls your acceleration, your braking and your steering. For ordinary versions of this car though, the technology is found in more tactile things. I mean, you might even bond with one. And for a family-orientated Kia, that's a big step forward. There's always been plenty of potential here for a class-leading dynamic performance. The Ceed has, after all, long had a more sophisticated suspension system than most rivals offer in their mainstream guises. Instead of the crude, old torsion beam rear suspended setup that you'll find on an ordinary Focus or Golf, this Kia gets the kind of more sophisticated multi-link rear damping system that Ford and Volkswagen Group rivals reserve for pricier and more powerful versions of their family hatchback contenders. And here it's embellished with the kind of bespoke engineered handling setup that you might not expect in this corner of the market. It's all built on a much stiffer K2 series platform, and it's garnished with feelsome power steering aided by a torque vectoring system that helps to get the power down through the bends. The result is a slightly firmly suspended car, but it's one that we think you'll genuinely enjoy driving. Could say it's relatively easy for Kia to showcase its newfound sense of style on low-volume halo models like the Stinger. A mainstream family contender like this one is a sterner test of the brand's commitment to cutting-edge aesthetics, and that's a policy presided over by design chiefs Peter Schreier and Gregory Guillaume. What they've served up here falls short of being truly arresting, but it is a useful evolution over the previous model. It's lower and wider than the car it replaces. Now, surprisingly, the brand hasn't followed the current trend for longer wheelbases, which sit within the same roadway footprint, but we're assured that the shorter overhangs allow for more efficient interior packaging. Well, we'll see. In terms of upgraded looks, most of the effort seems to have gone in here at the front with its wider tiger nose grille and its lower air intake. The Porsche-like ice cube style LED daytime running lights, which characterise the sportier versions of the previous model, are now standard, and this time you'll find those built into the headlamps, which on a top model like this one feature full LED beams which can turn with the bends. Smart ribbed corner cutouts incorporate these standard front fog lights, while further up, sharp, straight lines are employed to visually lengthen the bonnet. From the side, you get more of a perspective for the bolder, more horizontal shoulder line, and that's something that's even more evident on the Sportswagen Estate version of this model. With this 5-door hatch variant, it's slightly easier to get the feel for the way that the passenger cell has been pushed 68mm backwards, and that's something that's further emphasised by the wide rear C-pillar. That gives the upper window line a sleeker half-moon style shape. It all combines to create the illusion of a longer, larger car. Now, the shorter overhangs just mentioned are more obvious too, particularly the one at the back, which, as we'll see later, allows for a significantly larger boot. And to meet the prevailing fashion, there are largish wheels. They vary in size between 16 and 18 inches, and we've got the 17 inches here. At the rear, a more defined centre crease below the now horizontally orientated LED light clusters emphasises this third generation model's 20mm of extra width. The old diffuser style corner cutouts have gone, and they're replaced by these slashed sections at each end of the bumper that house the vertical reflectors. Further up, an integrated roof-mounted spoiler offers a neat finishing touch. As usual though, what's more important is the stuff that you can't see. A stiff new K2 platform and body shell, which saves 23 kilos of weight over the previous structure, although all that actually does is compensate for the weight of the extra safety kit that this third generation model has to carry around. Time to take a seat at the wheel and see what the European design team has done to improve this third generation model's cabin. Now, nothing particularly revolutionary has gone on here. In fact, at first glance, you might think it's the sort of interior that we'd have seen from a Kia model maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Take a second glance though, one that might take in the considerably improved standards of quality that feature here. Now, it still can't be said to be classily Golf-like, but soft touch dash-top plastics, silvered trim, and on the pricier models, shiny piano black surfaces abound, and build quality from the Slovakian factory is agreeably tight, certainly more so than in the rival 4th generation Ford Focus we recently tested. The design ergonomics are also different and angled slightly more towards the driver this time around. And to be honest, we didn't think there was much wrong with the previous model's more enveloping layout, but there's no doubt that this more horizontally orientated fascia gives the cabin an area and more spacious feel. It's split into 2 sections. There's a lower area which houses controls for audio, heating and ventilation, and an upper region which is dominated by this central coloured touchscreen. That's another one from the school of interior styling that thinks modern buyers want the impression of an iPad sprouting from the middle of the dash. Entry-level trim gives you a 7-inch version of this monitor, but otherwise you'll be favoured with this 8-inch display. Either option delivers clear, neat graphics and usefully large shortcut buttons. There's no separate iDrive style control for this display, such as you'd get in, say, a rival Mazda 3, but we do like the clarity that this setup brings to the business of accessing the usual features that screens of this kind tend to deliver: navigation, a 6-speaker DAB audio setup, and a package of Kia connected services powered by TomTom. Now these are able to alert you to speed cameras, update you on the weather and provide accurate information on traffic jams, roadworks, car parks and fuel stations. Now, if you don't want to have to pinch and swipe, there's voice control of course, and as usual you can connect in your handset using the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring systems. Getting comfortable is easy thanks to plenty of seat and wheel adjustment, although lumbar support is missing from the driver's seat of volume variants. The leather-trimmed 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel feels sporty this time around, and through it you view 2 clearly presented dials which are separated either by a simple trip computer or by the classy-looking 4.2-inch colour supervision cluster display that's fitted to plusher models like this one. This offers driver info, including a digital speedo, along with a compass and a briefing on safety settings. Frontward visibility is expansive, that's thanks to these thin A-pillars. Not so good though is rearward visibility. That's thanks to the small rear screen and thick pillars behind the rear doors that block your view throughout tight parking manoeuvres. Kia is apparently aware of this, which is why a rear view camera is included across the range and rear parking sensors come as standard above entry-level trim. Cabin practicality is reasonable, although the glove box and the door pockets could be bigger. On the plus side though, Kia has at last provided a lidded area where you can charge your phone away from prying eyes. This compartment ahead of the gear stick has a 12-volt aux-in and twin USB sockets. And the brand's also remembered to include an overhead compartment for your sunglasses, and below the gear lever, a pair of cup holders is covered by this ratcheting sliding top. To the right of that, this top model has an electronic handbrake, and there's a small coin tray just behind it. Volume variants dispense with that arrangement in favour of the conventional lever. And there's also a shelf at the bottom of the centre stack that on plusher variants includes a wireless charging mat. And there's a large storage box here between the seats, which is spacious and deep, but which lacks interior connectivity points. Overall, there's really not too much to criticise here because by and large the detail stuff has been really well thought through. So latches operate with a quality click, handles slide back with a damped sigh, and you get thoughtful touches like discrete lighting around the USB and aux-in ports. Of course, it isn't perfect. There are more buttons than we're used to seeing in a cabin of this kind these days. Cheaper plastic panels have been used in areas like the base of the centre console, and you might object to the fake plastic stitching that features on the fascia top and on the door cards, and also possibly to the chintzy little musical chime that you get when you exit the car. It's an irritating Asian market orientated feature that has no place in what's supposed to be a Europeanised model. Time to take a seat in the back. Now, the fact that the wheelbase is unchanged this time around on a car with a 23mm lower roofline might lead you to expect a distinctly average showing in terms of rear passenger space, but the Korean brand claims the opposite. So let's pull back this wide opening door, take a look. That broader body certainly helps. Kia claims a 34mm increase in shoulder room back here. There's a class-leading 1406 mils of it. And that, along with this notably low centre transmission tunnel, means that a Ceed can more comfortably accommodate 3 rear adults than most of its segment rivals. 16mm lowering of the seating position compensates for this model's reduced roof height too. Not so good is legroom, although it's certainly class competitive, and one 6-footer can just about sit behind another in reasonable comfort, and that's aided by these scalloped seat backs. 3 kids should be perfectly happy here. All variants get this rear centre armrest with its incorporated twin cup holders plus netted seat backs. The more affordable versions though unfortunately miss out on these twin centre vents, and none get either a 12-volt port or a USB port to enable backseat folk to connect up, which is a bit of an omission. There are coin recesses in the door handles, and this top variant gets heated upholstery too. So let's finish as usual with a look at the boot. Now, it's been boosted in size, as we referenced earlier, by a 20mm reduction in the length of the rear overhang. There's 395 litres of space on offer here, and that's about 15 litres more than you'll get from either the previous generation Ceed or from a class favourite like a Golf or a Focus. In this segment, only Peugeot's 308 and Skoda's Octavia offer more. This area is deep and it's regularly shaped, plus there are useful touches including a couple of bag hooks, a left-hand retaining strap and 4 chromed tie-down points. Plus on plusher models you get this 12-volt socket too. The useful dual-height boot floor that you have to pay extra for on that competing Focus hatch is here supplied as standard across the range, and most models include a spare wheel beneath it too. It's also easier to get bulky stuff in thanks to an 87mm reduction in sill height over the previous model. Unfortunately though, you don't get the ski hatch for longer items, which is provided on most versions of this model's Hyundai i30 cousin. If you opt for the stylised Pro Ceed shooting brake model, the luggage area size grows to 594 litres, and on the boxier Sportswagen Estate it's 625 litres. If you need more space and you want to push forward the 60/40 split rear backrest, you'll find that the 1291 litre capacity freed up in this hatch model still isn't quite as large as the area offered by the previous Ceed design. That lowered roof height had to tell somewhere, of course. If that's an issue, then there's always the Sportwagen Estate, and that offers 1694 litres of capacity with the seats folded. This Ceed might not be quite the bargain it once was, but Kia still reckons that it offers an awful lot for your money. Asking prices sit in the usual £18,500 to £27,000 bracket, which is common to mainstream family hatchbacks these days. But within this, Kia still reckons to undercut obvious rivals by about 15%, and that's a claim that is largely borne out by list price study. Now, we should point out that this 5-door hatch isn't the only Ceed body style on offer. Opt for the alternative Sportswagen Estate version of this Kia and you'll be looking at the usual premium of £1,000. Or alternatively, there's the sportier Pro Ceed body style, which this time around isn't a 3-door coupe, but instead it's evolved into what the industry calls a shooting brake, and that's a kind of sportier station wagon. We'll focus here though on the 5-door hatch variant. That's the one that most buyers will want, and delve a bit deeper now into the range pricing structure. Now, if you need to try to keep your outlay beneath the £20,000 price point, you'll have to stick with the entry-level 2-spec variants, and they're based around either the 3-cylinder 1-litre TGDI petrol engine, or if you're prepared to find an extra £1,250, the 1.6-litre CRDI diesel. As part of the 2-level spec, all models get an eco pack, and that includes low rolling resistance tyres and, for better aerodynamics, an underbody cover, slightly lowered suspension and an active air flap in the front grille. Now, if you are looking towards the more affordable end of the range, but you want the 4-cylinder 1.4-litre 138 brake horsepower petrol unit that we've been trying here, or you want access to an automatic gearbox, then your first option is Blue Edition spec, and that's available only on this 5-door hatch. That trim level comes only with the petrol 1.4. It's available either with manual transmission or, for £1,100 more, Kia's smooth shifting 7-speed DCT automatic gearbox, and that features an extra sport mode driving option. But what about if you want a slightly nicer trimmed Ceed? Well, for that, you'll start your search in mid-range 3-spec territory, which gives you the choice of all 3 of those engines. Plus, if you can stretch beyond the 1-litre petrol unit, you'll be offered the auto gearbox option, not only on the 1.4-litre petrol, but also on the 1.6-litre diesel. From launch, as usual with Kia models, there were generously specified first edition variants available at the top of the range too, and they were offered only with the 1.4-litre TGDI petrol engine. You might also want to talk to your dealer about the 48-volt mild hybrid diesel powertrain that Kia has developed for this car. In keeping with this 3rd-generation Ceed model's more dynamic remit, there are various sporty options in the range too. Now, if all you need is a more purposeful look, there's a sportier GT line trim level available, which gives you much of the look and feel of the range-topping GT hot hatch variant. If nothing but that top GT model will do, then you'll get yourself a car that really can make the most of this Mark IV model's uprated drive dynamics. It's equipped with a potent 201 brake horsepower, 1.6-litre TGDI petrol power plant. That engine, along with the 1.4 litre petrol and the 1.6 litre diesel, also features in the shooting brake style Pro Ceed model we mentioned earlier, and that's sold only with sporty GT line or top GT trim. Go for the 1.6 litre diesel engine with one of those sportier models, and your dealer will offer it to you in an uprated 134 brake horsepower, guys. Enough with range structure, let's move on to consider the value proposition that mainstream model Ceed pricing represents across the range. Now, previous generation versions of this Kia offered old tech petrol engines at the foot of the lineup, which allowed the brand to delve down into budget brand territory with this car. There's none of that now, well, not in our market anyway, so budget orientated models in this segment like Nissan's Pulsar and Fiat's Tipo, which can undercut this car by over £2,000 or more, can rest easy. It is more surprising to find that this car's Korean cousin, the Hyundai i30, which under the skin is virtually identical to this Kia, can apparently undercut this Ceed by around £1,300. Now, Kia says that the difference would be covered off if you were to equalise specs between the two cars. Well, perhaps. Now, both these two Korean models are gunning for the three segment sales leaders, the Ford Focus and the Vauxhall Astra, which both cost around about the same as this Kia, and the Volkswagen Golf, which, if you're looking at directly comparable models, can cost you up to a couple of thousand more. Talking of the Golf, you might also be considering two other Volkswagen Group mainstream family hatchbacks in this sector that use the Golf's technology, Seat's Leon and Skoda's Octavia. Once you've pored over the price lists, you'll find that the savings that most like-for-like Leon and Octavia models offer over the Ceed are relatively slight, at which point this Kia's superior driving dynamics come into play. And the same is true of other potential rivals like Peugeot's 308, Honda's Civic, the Mazda 3, Renault's Megane, Citroën C4 Cactus or Toyota's Corolla. In all these cases, if you've taken the trouble to test drive this Kia, you might well find yourself unable to shake the feeling that this Ceed's arguably a more complete product. Certainly better to drive than many of its rivals. It'll offer you a wider range of model and engine options, and the technology that it now delivers is a step ahead of some competitors. So if, having considered all of this, you conclude it is this Kia that you really want in this segment, then you're going to need to know just how generous this brand's been when it comes to the standard spec. So let's see. The Volume 2 spec trim level, which was the range entry point at the launch of this car, gives you a pretty reasonable amount. So tick off 16-inch alloy wheels, LED daytime running lights, tinted glass, automatic headlamps, LED rear lamps and an alarm, plus neat touches like a front wiper de-icer, and you get a spare wheel on most models this time around too. Inside, as you'd expect, there's air conditioning, leather trim for the steering wheel, the gear knob and the handbrake, and driver's seat height adjustment. There's also cruise control with a speed limiter, a variable height boot floor, and some significant electronic camera-driven safety features that some more budget-minded rivals will charge you extra for. Now, we'll talk about those in more detail in a few minutes. Infotainment at this level is taken care of by a 7-inch colour touchscreen audio display, and that's your access point for a 6-speaker DAB audio setup, a reversing camera, Bluetooth and Apple CarPlay or Android Auto smartphone mirroring. What about if you can afford to spend a little more on your Ceed though? Well, if so, you'll find that the next two trim levels in the hierarchy, Blue Edition and mid-range 3 spec, are pretty similarly equipped. The Blue Edition versions are the only variants in the range that have to do without a spare wheel, but those derivatives do gain specific features like LED bifunction headlights, premium paint colour options and stainless steel pedals. You don't get any of that stuff on the 3 spec models, but with these you do get dual zone air conditioning, an auto defogging system for the windscreen, rear air vents, an auto dimming rear view mirror, powered front seat lumbar support, 4.2-inch Supervision colour cluster display in the instrument binnacle and a 12-volt socket in the boot. Both Blue Edition and 3 spec Ceed derivatives feature niceties like larger 17-inch alloy wheels, rear privacy glass, wide view power folding door mirrors, rear parking sensors, faux leather trim highlights on the seats and the doors, and front passenger seat height adjustment. And with these two trim levels, you also get the larger 8-inch centre dash infotainment screen we've been trying here. And that's complete with navigation and access to the range of Kia connected services that the brand provides in association with TomTom. Things like traffic, weather, parking, fuel station and speed camera data. Want to go even further? Well, if so, then GT line spec could appeal. That adds some sporty trimming touches inside and out. Here though, we've been trying the extremely well equipped but rather pricey first edition trim level that Kia offered for the initial period of this Mark III Ceed model sales life. This includes, well, just about everything except the kitchen sink. I mean, we're talking luxuries like full leather upholstery, heated and cooled, power adjustable front seats, an electric sunroof, heated steering wheel, heated rear seats, keyless entry, a wireless phone charger, a smart park assist system to automatically steer into spaces, and an 8-speaker JBL premium sound system. Let's complete our run through of Ceed trim levels, and we'll finish with a mention for the full-fat GT hot hatch model. That gives you 18-inch alloy wheels and sport seats trimmed in leather and suede, plus special sport suspension, bigger brakes, grippier Michelin Sport 4 Pilot tyres, and an electronic sound generator which delivers a characterful engine note into the cabin. On to options. Now, as usual with Kia, there aren't that many. The brand believes that customers will prefer to move up a trim level rather than go box ticking. Your dealer will, though, sell you practical items like a boot tidy bag, a protection foil to cover the top of the rear bumper against scratches, a coat hanger to go on the front seat backs, and a luggage carry hook that you can hang your takeaways on in the cabin. Let's also mention that on the 2 and 3 spec models, you can specify classier premium paint colours too, although not, unfortunately, this particular car's attractive blue flame shade. So let's finish with a perusal of the safety stuff on offer, and that's the area in which the specification of this car has taken arguably its biggest step forward. While some other rivals only fit the choicest high-tech camera-driven features on their very priciest variants, Kia gives you most of what you'll need right across the range. Its lane keeping assist setup, for example. Now this will warn you if the car is unintentionally wandering over a road marking before gently steering your Ceed back to where it ought to be. And as you now expect from a car in this class, there is a standard autonomous emergency braking system. Now Kia badges its technology FCA, or Forward Collision Avoidance Assist. This is the type of setup that was a key omission from the previous generation version of this model. Now, as usual, this is a kind of camera-driven package that, as you drive, scans the road ahead, searching for potential collision hazards. If one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond, or perhaps you aren't able to, then the brakes will automatically be applied, and that's to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. We were a bit disappointed to find, though, that the pedestrian-orientated element of that autonomous braking system, and that's the kind of thing that's integral to most rival setups, is only optional on most versions of this Kia, and that's as part of an advanced driving assistance pack. Now choose that same pack on a Ceed with automatic transmission, and it will also include an electronic parking brake and smart cruise control. And that'll not only automatically keep you a safe distance behind another vehicle on the highway, but it can even slow you right down to a stop and then start you off again if you come across a tailback. Other standard Ceed features are more familiar. There are twin front, side and curtain airbags, although there's no driver's knee bag, plus ISOFIX rear child seat fastenings and active front head restraints that prevent whiplash. As usual with Kia, there's the brand's VSM, that's Vehicle Stability Management System, which ensures stability when braking and cornering by controlling the car's ESC, Electronic Stability Control System, if it detects a loss of traction. In addition, as usual with a family hatch of this kind, there's tyre pressure monitoring and hill start assist control to stop the car from rolling backwards as you pull away on inclines. As you'd also now expect in this segment, the ABS anti-lock brakes are aided in panic stops by a brake assist feature, plus an emergency stop signal that flashes the hazard lights to warn following motorists. In addition, a standard driver attention warning system monitors for signs of fatigue, and it'll prompt you to take a break during a journey. And there's a readout in the instrument binnacle that tells you when the last break was. From the start of this Mark III Ceed model sales life, it was only this premium-priced first edition model that got the most advanced camera-driven safety features that have been developed for this third generation design. Here, the headline piece of technology is the brand's LFA, lane following assist system, which can only be fitted to the automatic models. This detects road markings to keep the car in the centre of its lane on the highway, and it controls acceleration, braking and steering to deliver at least a limited form of self-driving tech. Here at the top of the range, you also get 3 further camera-driven features. Blind spot collision warning. Now that works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake if there's a vehicle in your blind spot. Rear cross traffic alert is there for when you're backing out to let you know if any vehicles are approaching from the side. And the speed limit information function pictures speed signs as you pass them and then displays them on the screen in the instrument menu. Might never have expected to be handing over £20,000 or more for a Korean family hatchback like this one, but then you might never have expected to be able to own a 5-seater family hatch of this kind that's capable of nearly 120 miles an hour. Yet also thanks to Kia's eco-dynamics efficiency technologies, one that's able to return nearly 75 miles per gallon and under 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. Times move on and we need to adjust our perspectives to suit. Now those sorts of figures are the ones that you'll buy into if you go for an engine that Kia spent a lot of time over as part of the process of developing this third generation Ceed model. It's U3 series 1.6 litre CRDI diesel. The Koreans had to redesign this power plant to meet the stricter Euro 6D emissions standard, so they've taken the opportunity to thoroughly upgrade it with selective catalytic reduction, active emissions control technology, which uses a urea additive that virtually eradicates all NOx emissions. You'll need to top up that additive in a special tank every 5,000 miles. Plus, as with all current Ceed variants, there's standard ISG intelligent stop and go technology that cuts the engine when you don't need it, when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. Bear in mind though that it won't function after a cold start or if the air conditioner is working particularly hard. We've just referenced the results of all that effort. To be specific, we're talking 74.3 mpg on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2. Those figures being the ones that Kia gave us calculated on the new WLTP cycle, but converted back to the most recent NEDC 2.0 spec, since that's what a lot of rival models are still using. That emissions figure will mean an affordable benefit in kind rating for company drivers at 24% for a base 2 spec diesel derivative. From an economy point of view, what all that means is that in a base diesel version of this Korean family hatch, users should be able to achieve an operating range approaching 900 miles from a single fill of its 50-litre fuel tank. Or to put it another way, they could get themselves a car in which they could travel from London to Italy without refuelling. The figures quoted apply to a 114 brake horsepower, 1.6 litre CRDI Ceed, supplied in 2 specification, which means it'll come complete with what the brand calls an eco pack. Now this includes low rolling resistance tyres and, for better aerodynamics, an underbody cover, slightly lowered suspension and an active air flap in the front grille. If you want to do better than that, then you'll need to talk to your dealer about Kia's latest 48-volt mild hybrid technology, which has seen more expensive CRDI versions of the Ceed developed to feature an engine assisted by a compact starter generator unit, which is belt connected to the crankshaft. Power for this so-called Ecodynamics Plus system comes from a small lithium-ion battery mounted beneath the boot floor, and it works when you lift off the throttle to coast or use the brakes, at which point the starter becomes a generator, recharging the battery with energy that you'd otherwise lose in the form of heat. Now, the Korean maker claims that this technology improves efficiency by up to 4%. Enough with diesel. Well, that seems to be the current European perspective anyway. Now let's switch our attention to the TGDI petrol units that'll probably account for a greater proportion of sales. Well, the 1 litre 3-cylinder unit will anyway. It would take too long to detail all the engineering intricacies of this little 998cc power plant. Things like the integrated exhaust manifold, which lowers exhaust temperatures, cleaning emissions, and the dual thermostat split cooling system, which reduces friction, improving efficiency. Anyway, the result of all that is a set of running cost stats that may for many make the switch away from diesel that much easier to contemplate. 52.3 mpg on the combined cycle and 122 grams per kilometre of CO2 for a 1 litre TGDI model fitted with that eco pack that we referenced earlier. Here we're trying Kia's 4-cylinder TGDI technology in the form of the 138 brake horsepower 1.4 litre Ceed petrol model. Here the converted back NEDC figures suggest you'll get 48.7 mpg and 132 grams per kilometre of CO2. All of the brand's 4-cylinder engines can, on request, be paired with the company's 7DCT automatic transmission. Now this hits the efficiency figures on the diesel model by about 5%, but strangely it works the other way around with the 1.4 litre petrol variant and actually improves them by about 5%. What else might you need to know? Likely residual values. Well, they're a lot higher than they used to be on mainstream Kia models. Independent experts reckon that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, your Ceed will still be worth between 36 and 41% of what you originally paid for it, depending on the variant that you select. When it comes to servicing, the petrol variants need regular garage visits every 12 months or 10,000 miles, while the diesel doubles that mileage to 20,000 miles. And as usual with Kia, you can budget ahead with prepaid servicing plans, and that's courtesy of the brand's Care 3 package, which offers a fixed price deal which covers your first 3 garage visits, and that's a package that can be extended to include 5 visits if you go for the upgraded Care 3 Plus option. In addition, a customer can now purchase services up to and including the 7th one, so matching the full length of the warranty. Whatever plan you go for, you can also bundle in an MOT test, and on that basis you'll have the peace of mind in knowing that virtually all maintenance costs will probably be covered for the entire time that your name will be on the logbook. An even stronger buying incentive is the much trumpeted 7-year, 100,000 mile warranty, which, like the Care 3 servicing packages, is transferable to future owners. However, it's worth pointing out that the warranty only offers unlimited mileage for the first 3 years that you own the car. Thereafter, you'll have a 100,000 mileage restriction. If in future the car is sold through a Kia used approved dealership when it's less than 18 months old or with less than 18,000 miles on the clock, the warranty will be topped up to match that of a new model. And finally, well, you might also want to note that roadside assistance cover is limited to 1 year, but you do get a long 12-year bodywork warranty. As for insurance, well, groupings start at either Group 12D or 13D for a 1 litre TGDI petrol model. It's Group 15D for the 114 bhp 1.6 litre CRDI diesel, and it's Group 18D, 19D or 20D for this 1.4 litre TGDI petrol power plant. That depends on the spec that you select. The originator of this model line had promise. Its successor didn't quite fulfill that, but in many respects, this more dynamically orientated Mark III model does. There will still be plenty of people, of course, who will blindly buy a Focus, a Golf or some other family hatchback from a conventional mainstream brand without considering its Korean alternative. But these will largely be uninformed folk who are yet to fully cotton on to the way that products in this segment have changed. The growing reputation of this Ceed, though, means that there are fewer and fewer customers of that kind around. Of course, shortlist selection isn't the same as a sale. There are family hatch folk who will want more powerful engines or a classier cabin than this car can offer, but we'd suggest that quite a number will be very satisfied with this Kia's impressive quality, its well-judged practicality and its sensible pricing. Now true, those asking figures may be a little higher than you might expect from a South Korean manufacturer, but don't judge them until you've tried the product. It's a confident design from a very confident brand. It'll probably remain in its position as Kia's 3rd bestseller, but it's now a more compelling alternative to the brand's Sportage SUV in the showrooms, and that's thanks in no small part to the greater emphasis on drive dynamics this time around. Now, we would still rate the rival Ford Focus as best in class to drive, and there is also something very solid and pleasing about the way a Golf goes down the road. But this Ceed is now within touching distance of those two class leaders, and it's the first mainstream Kia model that we've genuinely looked forward to driving. Not that Kia's development team can relax. To make another significant step forward, this model line needs a more upmarket cabin, a more eye-catching look, and probably a bit more advanced autonomous driving tech too. Still, we don't doubt that all these things are under development. In the meantime though, we think a significant number of family-orientated buyers in this segment will like this Kia exactly as it is. And they'll agree with us that it's a career move for the better.